majority all ready to go, which is fantastic. So yeah, we'll get started with the webinar. Again, thank you all for attending. It's great to see you all here. This is a webinar as part of the Lichfield and Tamworth Chamber of Commerce webinar programme during these testing and uncertain times. We also welcome Cannock Chase Chamber as well. I can see there was some schools locally. I live in Hensford, so it's good to see Kingsmead High School. I think are on the call as well. With the links with South Staffordshire College in Rodbaston and Cannock, and also Julie Poppleton and Sutton Academy based in Burntwood. Sort of crosses the boundaries across the three areas, so it's a really useful way for businesses and educational establishments across the district to discuss what is a very important subject for those in education, and we hope to really try and keep that on the radar of business as well. Obviously, it's a very difficult time currently for the business community and the economy in general, but as we move through the summer and towards September and the ongoing discussions around the education side of things, it's important that we try and keep those young people in the area, in Lichfield, in Tamworth, in Chase, at the top of our minds when looking at apprenticeships, work experience, etc. A few introductions. Firstly, you'll see Julie Poppleton on screen. Julie is Director of Careers and in the senior leadership team at Sutton Academy in Burntwood. She's also a member of the Lichfield and Tamworth Executive Committee and does a huge amount of work across South Staffs in terms of the skills gap and careers for all of her pupils, and knows a lot of you in other schools as well. We also have John Renshaw, Head of Apprenticeships and Career Engagement at South Staffordshire College. John is on the chat. If you can say hello, John, through the chat, that'd be great. There's a few technical problems today with John's line, but he will be certainly be involved in the Q&A a little bit later. And I can see from the numbers of people who have been engaged and who have attended today, there's some really interesting people and good establishments across the educational landscape in the area. So we're really looking forward to some interesting Q&As following the presentations. Final thing from me is really if there are any questions, if there is anything you want to ask any of our speakers or between you, please put it in the box, and then at the end of the presentations we'll have a Q&A. The main areas we're going to focus on, Julie will go through in a moment, so keep an eye on the presentation, give us some questions, and we look forward to hearing from you all a little bit later. So first and foremost, I'll pass you over to Julie. Julie Poppleton from Sutton. Over to you. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Really lovely to speak to you all and have you on board today. So a little bit about the trust itself. So as Chris has said, Sutton Multi-Academy Trust, I'm employed by Chase Terrace Technology College, who are part of the Multi-Academy Trust in Burntwood, which is part of the Lichfield district. I've been there employed for about 6.5 years. And then prior to that, Chase Terrace was one school that I used to work at as when I worked for Connections as one of their careers advisors. So some of the bullet points you can see there are some of the achievements that the trust and the school have achieved over the time that I've been there for. Next slide, please, Jess. Okay, so this is just a little bit more about myself. So prior to the 6.5 years that I've worked for Chase Terrace, a variety of backgrounds, including the private industry, so a variety of roles within retail, within customer service, within education and training. So currently I'm the level 7 careers leader. I'm also a level 6 qualified careers practitioner, and like many of us, there are a lot of different roles, responsibilities and commitments that we have in addition to our main role. So again, you can see I don't need to read all of those out to you, but you can see what some of my additional commitments are. And as Chris has said, a lot of work that's been done in the area around skills and employability and really trying to raise the profile of careers advice and guidance. Next slide, please. Okay, so with regard to sort of what today is all about, these are the webinar objectives, and there will be plenty of opportunity to ask some questions at the end of this with regards to what we're covering. It's so little time, so I've only got about 10 minutes to sort of talk to you today. We want to leave enough time at the end to be able to talk about some of these objectives. Next slide, please, Jess. Okay, so in terms of, so I'm just trying to move my, I don't think I can move my picture across so I can actually see the slides properly. Okay, in terms of the main thing really for us working in education is going to be looking at the longer term stability that we will need to support our students with in schools ahead of what has happened at the moment. We would definitely need to be looking at new strategies and looking at our curriculum and our curriculum planning from September 2020 as to how we're going to be meeting the current crisis and some of those gaps that it has created. It will be absolutely critical. You know, there are some really outstanding examples of good practice of where business and educators have already been working together really effectively. But again, this is going to be a critical time that we continue to do that and probably do that in even more collaboration, looking at how we can plan ahead together for this. Not surprised at all for many of us. We're all in this same situation. There has been that cultural shift where now, of course, there is the remote working. It's been new for many of us, certainly myself. I've had to learn new technology and new ways of having to work from home, whether that's been professionally with webinars today, whether it's been professional meetings, and also still doing that careers advice and guidance to our students and parents and families throughout Burntwood. One of the challenges, of course, for that will definitely be technology. So for some of our students, not all of them have got the access to technology from home. I know there are plans for government funding to be able to look at that for our most sort of vulnerable. There are some links that I can share with you at the end if you want to have a look at that. Labour market, of course, is going to be a critical one in terms of looking at a way forward, and previous data that has been around will absolutely be out of date sort of now. I will be showing you some slides. I won't go into those in a lot of detail. Again, we will be sharing the slides with you, and for those that are interested, literally only about 20 minutes ago, I had an email with a report from MZ with some up-to-date labour market for the Staffordshire area. So I didn't have the opportunity to share that on the presentation today, but I can certainly share that with you. At the moment, like many of us, with the introduction of the Gatsby benchmarks, one of those benchmarks was the expectation for schools and colleges to be doing 3-year destinations. And there's been some very interesting data that we have found ourselves from doing some of that tracking with those 3-year destinations. The highest levels of unemployment out of any before Covid-19 was the 19 to 24-year-old group, and that group continues to be quite a concern for us now, obviously with the challenges that are at the moment. Next slide, please, Jess. Okay, so as I said, there's been a lot of conversations that I've been having and all my colleagues that are working in careers have been having with their students and their parents and their families. With the trust, we also actually have a contract where we have been working with some of our adults in the wider community of Burntwood as well. So a lot of remote working, a lot of conversations and a lot of feedback that we've been getting from that. What has been interesting is the shift in aspirations of some of those people we have been speaking to. So for a lot of young people, they had certainly never heard of this idea of key worker roles at all before. So perhaps some of those within the food industry, within logistics, within manufacturing, it's certainly roles that they hadn't considered at all before, but they are now roles that they are starting to want to find out more about and find out about future opportunities for those. The other interesting feedback that I've had is how much concern and fear that there is around those that had initially been considering setting up their own business in the future. And again, because of the impacts they can see on their own families and those that are perhaps self-employed or own their own businesses, the impacts of that that's had on them financially as a family has certainly created some fear around those feelings of perhaps being an entrepreneur in the future. And again, the other thing, absolutely, for adults and for parents that I've spoken to and that have reached out to me, not just from our school, but actually from wider areas within Staffordshire, are now using this time to really self-reflect on their lives, their careers, their family life, that sort of work balance. And they're really starting to question and reflect, when all this time is over, do they actually want their lives to go back to how it was before COVID-19? So they are asking questions like, actually, was I happy? Was I getting what I wanted to from that particular job? What's important to me now? And for a lot of those adults, they are also seeking careers advice and guidance with how can they make those changes? How can they upskill, or how can they change particular careers? Obviously, we are a business ourselves, and we have noticed an increase in our own staff that have actually come to us that they, again, themselves started to think, actually, can we have reduced hours? We've enjoyed spending more time with our families at home. Or again, is the opportunity that I can do some more remote working from home myself? It's most definitely starting to become more of the norm. And people now are considering what their priorities sort of actually are. Next slide, please, Jess. Okay, so the following 3 slides, I'm not going to go into full details with these of you. As I said, these slides will be available to you. This is some of the data that was shared up until April the 13th. At the end, the final slide I will be relating to all of the resources and some of the data and research that's already been out there. As you can see, this is just showing you some of those responses in changes to recruitment already. Next slide, please, Jess. Oh, has that missed one? No. Yes, there we go. Okay, so again, you can see there's a breakdown within Staffordshire, within sort of regions. And again, I know that everybody today is not from Staffordshire. The information at the end, you will actually be able to generate a report for your own area, so you can look within your own areas about those trends, about the impact on recruitment within your areas, and about some of those job postings or the declines or the actual increase in recruitment for those. If you go to the next slide, Jess. That is an example of where you can see it's split into jobs by occupations, and you will be able to have a look in detail after the end of the webinar, where you can see some of those real increases. Some, of course, you will not be surprised at all. As I've already highlighted, it's some of those key worker roles, including obviously the food and the logistics and the retail. Most notably, of course, is the healthcare roles and within the NHS. Next slide, please. And yeah, you can go on to the next one. Okay, so how will this change the labour market? So some of you may already be familiar with EMSI. For those of you that are not familiar with them, they produce a huge amount of data. They're a market analytics firm, and as I said, you can actually put in your postcode and they will send a free generated report for you, so you can get more detail from that. Some of the things that have come out are not going to be a surprise to you, of course, at all. And in addition to the bullet points, you can see the current top 8 sectors that are in the labour market at the moment. With regard to the skills, has always been a challenge anyway. So the skills agenda is something both as a school, but also as an active member of the chamber and the other board, where it's been quite a concern with regards to the skills that have been missing and what employers have had concerns around recruitment for quite a few years now. This, of course, will actually have changed even more so. So now there's going to be a gap in even more skills that has been identified as a result of this crisis. And that, of course, will present a problem for both educators and employers with regard to being able to upskill and retrain people with regards to that. As I said, education, absolutely. We have got to look at these new strategies and how can we respond to this information that the labour market is giving us, and how can we put that into our curriculum? How can we get these messages across to our students, to our young people, and to our parents and our families about sort of labour market data that we've got at the moment? Not surprisingly yet, health and social care is the largest, employing at 2.3 million at the moment. And as it's saying, over 2 million jobs at the moment are dependent on pubs and restaurants. And you can see there with the figure the impact that it will have had from a financial perspective, just actually being closed for 1 month alone. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the impact really on careers advice and guidance for young people, adults and the sector itself. As I said to you, just myself, you know, within the area of Burntwood, I've noticed never ever has careers advice and guidance ever been more critical and more crucial for people to be able to have access to that. As I said, you know, my role is meant to be looking after those students up to the age of 18, but I am having parents and adults that are coming forward that are absolutely desperate for careers advice and for some kind of direction and signposting themselves. So literally the last 4 weeks, you know, 8 hours, 9 hours a day have been absolutely full with phone calls, with emails and with inquiries that are coming through. And I know that that will certainly be not just the case in my area, this will be the picture nationally. The challenge, of course, for that is there is a current shortfall of those level 6 qualified careers advice and guidance practitioners because of the cuts to government that happened sort of 7-8 years ago. What happened is that many decided to actually leave the profession because of the way they were feeling. They felt so undervalued, they didn't feel understood, they didn't feel appreciated, they felt that their expertise was not actually seen and was not as valued as other professionals that still required that level 6 and that expertise and that experience. And that, as I say, has actually created a massive shortfall of qualified careers advisors to be able to help all of these people that need this at this critical time. So it will be interesting because careers advisors themselves now have found themselves to be key workers. And it will be interesting if, like the NHS, that actually we will have to start encouraging people to come back to this profession that have previously left or were made redundant. Of course, and again, whether we will need to be recruiting people into this sector and getting people to become qualified to help all those that need that at the moment. Next slide, please. Okay, so a few things just to mention to you just before I sort of move on to all these links and resources. I have used, as I say, some data from professional bodies and institutes, and some of these links you'll be able to have a look at. There's also some real experts and some outstanding professionals that are doing some most amazing work out there with regard to this agenda at the moment. Before I came on to do this webinar, I did one. I'll just point out LJ Rawlings, who is on there from Youth Employment UK, and they again are doing the most amazing work with both employers and young people with regard to COVID-19. So I did make a note. As I say, if you actually go onto their website, they have got a COVID-19 youth employment group, and there is support on there for both young people and for employers. They, again, already from their conversations have been generating feedback and data and the concerns they've got about the impacts on youth employment. And from the conversations that they have been having, as they've said, what they're saying to employers is, this will have created, because young people will not have had the access, so you've got current year 10, Year 11 and Year 12 students, they will not have had access to the same opportunities as some of those older students. So things like work experience will have been cancelled, things like internships, perhaps some of those that will have got some part-time summer work or Saturday jobs. For our current Year 10s, I certainly know we had got planned things like mock interviews, they've got career taster mornings. There was so much left to do within this year that is going to leave massive gaps for them in terms of their work preparation and that employability, which I know was something that employers over years have expressed concerns about, that they felt that there were gaps there. And this will certainly be adding to that. So it's certainly something I think employers need to be aware of, that perhaps they're going to be needing to put some support into that particular generation, and it's something that they need to be aware of that could be the case. Not surprisingly, for some of those, particularly with special educational needs, they have struggled with this time more than anything. So particularly those that perhaps on the autistic spectrum that struggle with anxiety, those where structure and routine is extremely important to them, have really, really struggled during that particular time. So again, there's a lot of work that's got to be done with that. And again, that transition for the current Year 10s that we've got at the moment, as schools, we've got quite a job ahead of next year in terms of preparing them for leaving and that transition to get into the workplace. And I think that's it from me for now. Obviously, at the end, I'll be open for any questions from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. As always, hugely knowledgeable and some really interesting points. And I say I would encourage a lot of those people on the call here to put some questions for Julie on the back of that. I've got some written down myself. I can see there's some questions coming in as well, which we'll cover in a moment. Wanted to also now introduce South Staff's College. Now, John Renshaw, their head of apprenticeship employer engagement, is on the call, but a few technical issues has put it a bit of a risk in terms of his line. So what I'll do, Jess, if you could put on the presentation, and I'll just give a bit of an update in terms of South Staff's College and give them give everyone an understanding about some of the areas that they work in, and then we'll encourage John to engage on the questions and the answers as we go through the Q&A. So yeah, South Staff's College, for those of you who don't know, are based in Rodbaston, Cannock, Lichfield and Tamworth. The patrons of the Chamber of Commerce in those areas, and have been a huge support over many years, long before my time as well, I think, in terms of engaging with some of our business community. You'll see there the map of where they're based. I think the fact that they're so centrally based in those areas is a big connection to those towns. In terms of the actual figures, there's over 1,000 apprentices in South Staff's College, sort of on their books, working with over 800 employees with over 2,500 full-time students. So a really major player in the education side of things with apprentices. They offer apprentice courses across engineering, business administration, IT, logistics, vet nursing, horticulture, many different areas. And I think it is a real important part of the education establishment in our area, alongside schools like Stephen Sutton, who are doing so much work, and other schools near myself, Kingsmead and Chase, and many others. And that college link is, of course, very, very important. What we will do is invite John to answer some of the questions that we're getting in now. Obviously, going into a bit more detail on the distance learning and short courses they offer, we'll continue that, and you're more than welcome to look at that as we follow up following the seminar. There's obviously different levels of apprenticeship programs that they can offer for 16 to 18-year-olds and above that area. And again, it's bringing that link and that move into employment, which is so important in our local economy. And I think, I'm sure John would very much echo Julie's call on businesses, I suppose, is that don't forget this generation, I suppose, is a way to put it. There's Year 10s, there's Year 12s that really are, in a very, or Year 11, Year 13s even more so, that are in a very difficult position, that might not have that access to that work experience and that those links, which is so important. So if we'll go on to the questions now, and John, I could encourage you to go on to the Q&A and answer as well, and Julie will also engage. Julie, I suppose just from my side, I know having worked very closely having worked very closely with yourself on the committee and knowing how much work you've put in, how important is it for those employers to think and remember about these lost generations, of people? They're not lost yet, but there's obviously a risk of that. How important, and where perhaps specifically as we come out of the lockdown and businesses start up again, I suppose, is where could they immediately help local schools in that regard?
So, it's absolutely critical, because if I just think of us as a school alone, we are a large secondary school. So, as I said, really, and this is just at the moment, the impact will be on year 10, 11, 12 and 13. So just us, we're looking really, that's about 900 students, and that's just one school. So if we then think of the area of Lichfield, Tamworth and Chase, we're talking thousands. We're talking absolutely thousands there. So it's absolutely critical, because, as I said, this has had a massive impact on those. It's difficult, of course, with regard to perhaps, and it's going to be thinking out the box about how else that employers can support and help in this time. With regard to things like work experience, I know there's some really good examples out there at the moment where actually there are virtual work experience opportunities that people can look at. So again, for any of you that are interested that are listening today, I've been made aware of, there is going to be a day where employers have come together where they're actually offering that virtual experience. So this is certainly some of those bigger and those larger companies, but there's no reason why locally that couldn't be done with some of our local employers. As I said, we're absolutely in a new world now. We're all having to look at things doing virtually and doing that remotely. So we're going to have to perhaps look at doing things like work experience in a completely different way as well as. Again, it could be so. I know that, as I say, work experience placements have been cancelled. Things like summer internship programs have not been able to go ahead. We've not even looked at things like the graduate market as well. There's obviously going to be a massive impact for that, as there will for apprenticeships. So it's perhaps for employers to be looking at, and this will be interesting for any employers that are in today, to actually type up where you think you could help. It could be that perhaps once we get up and open and we've got businesses again, understandably, you're going to have to focus on your own staff and your own businesses, but it might be looking at things like perhaps mentoring opportunities, for example, or it might be that perhaps rather than a longer term placement or an internship, that perhaps it's something you could do on a smaller scale that's being offered. Certainly know with apprenticeships, I've had some conversations with employers over the last couple of days, and some of those have been some bigger ones. So I was in a conference with White Hat, for example, yesterday, and what they've said is actually it's business as usual for those. Yeah. So with regards to the recruitment, a lot of theirs is actually done virtually anyway. So a lot of their interviews, their telephone assessments, a lot of that has been virtual, and even their sort of big open day that they normally have, where they'll do a lot of those psychometric tests and sort of role plays, it's still business ahead as usual for those. Again, I've been contacted by Toyota, I've been contacted by Atos. So there are still a lot of companies that are recruiting in apprenticeships at the moment. So without shadow of a doubt, it will have had a massive impact. Yeah. But it is good to still hear there are some graduates that are being recruited, and still some apprenticeships.
And I think it's that virtual side, isn't it? Is that the adaptability of young people is there, isn't it? They're not stuck. They're not sort of stuck in their ways in certain areas that perhaps other people are. As you grow older, I suppose. So that adaptability is good. Really interesting answer. Thank you, Julia. I just wanted to pick up on.
Sorry, I was going to say, the other thing I would say that we've only really touched on slightly is, of course, with employers, it's really about the wider skills, that young people can offer. So particularly for those year 11s and those year 13s that had the opportunity to prove themselves with their not taking their exams this year. It is about the importance of those other skills, such as their resilience, their, teamwork, those social skills, those communication skills. So again, it's just saying to employers that actually when you are recruiting, it is critical to be looking at those as well as, don't just judge somebody around exams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just seen in some of the comments, picking up on some of those comments. So I saw that Paul Skitt from Flannery Plantire, who I visited with Jason Challoner before this, just before Christmas, up near the M42, and again, those careers events for plant, driving, those sort of real engineering and construction skills are still vital, and I think this is a key thing. But again, it's been that adaptability, and running virtual careers events I think is fantastic. I can see that again, Narjit from Worcester College has said that they're also hosting virtual open days, so I think that's a really important part of what we do, and you can see how people in the education industry and I suppose the education group are aware that things might have to change, but are reacting quickly to that. And I think that's only good for the young people that are involved, isn't it? Absolutely. I think there's a few more questions working around. So Lee Webster talking about the short courses available to Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5 students in sort of transitioning to full-time education or working. I think. What's your thoughts on that, Julie? And what do you see on that?
Absolutely, really good point. And I think that's the other thing. I've been having conversations with our students at the moment with regard to what they could actually be doing during this period of time. So past that, we have been looking at some of those short courses and those distance courses that are free and are available online at the moment. So there's plenty of opportunity. And again, for those schools that are not aware of what can they access, absolutely please contact me, because we have got contacts available. So some of our year 11s at the moment, I'm having conversations with those. There are level 2 health and social care, IT, customer service and employability qualifications they can be doing at the moment at home, remotely, 5 days, about 30 hours learning is all they have to do for that. And the other thing is, we focused on things like skills. We've got a lot of our students at the moment that are still involved in doing a lot of voluntary work. So it's about, for employers when they are interviewing them, and it is looking at, this is actually a real period of time that they can show. A common question in an interview can be, how have you coped in a situation that has really challenged you or that has been really difficult to overcome? And actually, young people can use this as that time. This is a completely unprecedented time. And I know for some of our students, they are doing voluntary, they are mowing neighbours' grass, they are doing their shopping, they are walking their dogs. And we're actually acknowledging that, we are issuing certificates of acknowledgement for that they will get accredited. And for some of our younger ones, we're actually planning to have an awards night later in the year to actually recognise what they have done during this period.
I think that's a really positive idea, isn't it? And as can see in the chat box there with Anna and from the Arthur Terry Learning Partnership, and you look at, we had a very similar event to this in Sutton Coldfield, or about Sutton Coldfield, earlier in the week, and one of the big ones there was the increase and the work that some of the schools have done on creating PPE with some of the students that were there. And as you say, yes, that's a great way, isn't it, to show pupils and show businesses that young people are still showing their best and doing what they can, and I think that's a good message to send out. I think picking up on one of your first points, actually, Julie, right at the start, was around the aspiration and the aspiration and how. And I know when we've spoken in committee meetings, it's almost as important that parents are involved in that discussion as well as students. Just sort of go into a bit more detail on the aspiration and what businesses, parents, whoever it might be, can do to try and be positive about the aspirational side of things for people.
So again, I've heard of some really good examples. Like many of us have been tuned into a lot of webinars over the last couple of weeks, and the one that was really good was Morgan Stanley said yesterday they have held a virtual parents' evening. So again, they've done that to invite students and parents along to find out about what opportunities that are available to them. So again, whether that's at an advanced apprenticeship, whether it's at those sort of higher or degree apprenticeship levels, and again, how can they apply, what are they looking for, what they can be doing right now to sort of enhance their sort of CV and their application form. So I think that's a really good way forward. Again, that's something that some of our employers here today could look at. Actually, is that something that we could do? Could we look at holding a virtual sort of parents' evening? So I certainly know, for example, when we did our expo 2 years ago, parent workshops and parent seminars was something absolutely that we wanted to open out to them. One, so they were completely aware of skills gap, labour market, all of the post-16 and post-18 opportunities, but also what opportunities that there were available for themselves. As you know, we're really, really keen and passionate on that family learning and about widening family aspirations. So it's absolutely critical to be involving parents in things like the careers and advice and guidance interviews, as well as their own seminars, as well as parent workshops, as well as employers talking to them in colleges and universities.
And I think that increase with the parents and the engagement naturally will then bleed into business, because most parents are involved in business in one way or another. I suppose a key one is the the struggle that all employees will have in one way or another. It's going to be tough, isn't it? But I think the positive messaging, being aspirational, talking that this is a phase. This is obviously a real struggle, but it's a phase. It will improve in the end. Whenever that end is, it will get better. And I think that's an important messaging from everyone, isn't it? Whether it's business, parent, pupil, or school, that that yes, this is a bad time, but we've had tough times previously, and not to let the work that's been done by a lot of people on this call and yourself and lots of other people in the area and across the whole of the country.
It's just lots of It is. It's given lots and lots of reassurance and obviously signposting to that support. So it is about keeping that continued contact at the moment, providing that outreach. And as I said to you, particularly those concerns around those with mental health at the moment, and around those special educational set of needs, and the other things that they're missing out on, it is around signposting those professionals that are still out there that are supporting that at the moment as well. The other thing I would say, sorry, that I missed about the parents, as well as the student alumni, we have got a parent alumni. So again, we reached out to parents to say, is this something that you can help with? Would you be prepared to come and give a talk to students, or would you come and do a mock interview? Can you offer any work experience? Would you come and talk about your own career journey and share that? And we had a really good uptake on that. So the parent alumni has actually worked really well.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's obviously an important part of important part of that getting that message out there, isn't there? It's absolutely right. Just looking at the final things, we've got a few more minutes. So if there are any other further questions, please put them over to Julie by all means. I think the final one from me is having moved on from the aspirations, was that career advice. Where does that sit, and who do you feel could, or how could people help with that career advice? Is there an opportunity for perhaps some people to get involved more? Does that seem to strike a chord with a lot of people around?
Definitely. So careers advice can come from lots of different people. Careers advice, many people would turn to their own parents and their own families for careers advice, which is why I said to you is why it's so crucial that parents are as informed as well. The difficulty that you can have sometimes, it's fantastic to have parents to give advice and guidance, and they're an absolute key part of that. But of course, the problem is that sometimes some parents, without realising it, will be their own agenda. It will perhaps be their own aspirations that they've got, that they want to have for sort of their child. And obviously they haven't got the knowledge or the training or the expertise for this. So parents can give it, teachers can give it, any adults, sort of any employers. I think the critical part really here, as I said, about that gap that we've got, it's those that are actually qualified in careers advice and guidance. So, the same way as in you've got somebody who's a qualified teacher or a qualified solicitor or a qualified, sort of the most critical part really has got to be about the funding. As I said, the government funding actually stopped about 7 years ago, so that schools and colleges could absolutely no longer access that at all. And that led to an absolute, we now have a complete fragmented service across the whole of the country. So with some schools, with some young people, they've got access to qualified and impartial advice and guidance. Some are allowed to have it, some aren't allowed to have it, some don't have access to it. It is, really, really fragmented. So the way forward is, as I said, it has never, ever been any more crucial or critical. The government has got to look at getting some kind of funding back in place so that everyone has got access to that qualified and impartial advice and guidance. It's got to have some funding now.
Yeah, that's important, isn't it? And I think a lot of it does come back to as always, communication, whether that's with parents, pupils, businesses, schools. And I think, I suppose if one thing we can learn from this is that it's very easy to communicate with a lot of people quite quickly through digital means, but that sort of the contact with people is equally as important. But I think it's very much around schools and businesses working together to communicate that, which is what we were discussing before this before this discussion.
Yeah, it's got to be. And as I said, there's already been some fantastic examples. Yeah. So with Careers and Enterprise Company and through the Chamber ourselves, we have seen there's been some fantastic examples of what's happened with employers and educators. But that has got to be stepped up. And we're going to have to think of a new way forward together. And you said the key word really there, communication. So, for careers advisors, part of that expertise is we are used to working with labour market information. That's part of our advice and guidance and sort of passing that on to students. So really with employers, it's so critical that they're actually passing on their needs and their changes to sort of schools and careers advisors as well, so that we can make sure that we are all communicating.
Yeah, and I think that is naturally going to change as the weeks and months go by into the next academic year in terms of what businesses need. But I think, as we said previous in the conversation, that adaptability for young people and that clear passion from a lot of people on the call here today within education to make sure that is borne through and is worked on and is pushed, I think is vital. So there's some really good discussions happening in the chats as well. So I appreciate everyone's engaging on that. I suppose, we've got a few more minutes left. So Julie, I think there was some really good positive points put in there. I think the careers side is a key one. Calling on businesses to continue to engage, and I know local businesses I sort of are aware of and are engaging with locally are great, and there's some really positive involvement there, and I think that's what the key is to move forward, isn't it? So I suppose a final point, what at this current situation, obviously things will change as we go into the summer, hopefully, and I'm sure they will change for the better. What would be your one sort of call upon businesses that can help schools, and what should they be looking at? What's the one thing they could do to help?
Sorry, I was reading some of the questions. And
what's the one thing, as a final sort of wrap up, what's the one thing businesses could do alongside schools to help in the next few months?
I think, as I said, it's about that planning ahead. And so for us now, for schools, yes, obviously we are in a shorter term, still advising and contacting and talking to young people, but we've got to look at the impact in the longer term. So from September onwards, it's a real piece of work for schools and colleges to look at how are we going to be getting this into our curriculums. So it is about employers, contacting us, having those conversations and look at actually how together can we do this from September and onwards.
Yeah, brilliant.
So, yeah,
Okay.
please reach out. If you're not sure how to contact people in school, that's been a common theme I know before, where employers have wanted to work with schools and have not been quite sure how to sort of do that. So absolutely, it's something that they can do either through the chamber, through the careers hub, through careers and enterprise. There are ways of being able to get into schools and get those conversations and that planning going.
Absolutely, no, that's great, and thanks so much for your time this lunchtime, Julie. Thanks to South Staff's John Renshaw, who was on the call as well, giving some information around the apprenticeship side. Again, what we can't stress anymore, as the end of that point made, is contact your schools, get the message out via the school side to that businesses can help, and any that do and want to. Please get in touch through the chamber or through Julie or through the people on this call. So once again, a huge thank you. There will be a follow up onto YouTube with this webinar, so you'll be able to get the information. The presentations are available, and please contact John and Julie if you do want to see more about that presentation. Thanks to see so many on the webinar as well. We will have a story following this up onto the news next week now. So a huge appreciation. Thanks so much. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe, everybody, and we'll speak again soon. Thank you.